The Vanishing Princess. The palace of Zytheria shone like a jewel in the middle of the galaxy. Its tall towers touched the sky and its silver walls glowed under the twin suns. Every alien in the kingdom feared and respected the Queen of Zytheria. She was strong, proud, and her word was law. But even a mighty queen had one weakness, her only daughter, Princess Leora. Princess Leora was young, curious, and full of life. She loved to sneak out of the palace to see the stars up close. The royal guards often warned her that the galaxy was full of danger, but she always laughed. "Mother will protect me. Nothing can harm me," she would say with a playful smile. One evening, the skies turned dark as a rare cosmic storm gathered. It was the kind of storm that ripped ships apart and swallowed entire fleets. The queen ordered every vessel to stay grounded. "No one flies tonight." Her voice thundered across the palace halls. But Princess Leora, restless and fearless, slipped away into her small royal cruiser. She wanted to see the storm herself, to touch the edge of danger. The guards noticed too late. By the time they reached the launch bay, her ship had already broken through the clouds, vanishing into the storm. Panic filled the palace. The queen's face turned pale as she realized what had happened. "Find her!" she roared. Her voice shook the entire chamber. Thousands of ships were sent out into the storm, their engines burning against the fierce winds. But the storm was too powerful. One by one, the search ships fell back, damaged and broken. Far above the palace, inside the storm, Princess Leora struggled. Her cruiser was small and the storm was merciless. Lightning-like energy struck the ship's wings. The controls sparked and failed. The ship spun out of control, falling into darkness. "Mother!" she cried as fear finally replaced her courage. The storm swallowed her scream. Back in the palace, the queen stood in her throne room, staring into the storm through the great crystal window. Every moment felt heavier than the last. Her generals lowered their heads. "Your Majesty, we cannot find her. The storm has taken the princess." The queen's hands trembled, but she hid them under her royal robe. "Keep searching," she said in a cold voice. But when she was alone, the mask of strength broke. Her heart shattered like glass. That night, the queen walked to the highest balcony of the palace. The storm still raged above, roaring like a monster. She lifted her hands to the sky and whispered, "Daughter, wherever you are, come back to me. Please come back." The galaxy soon learned the news. The Vanishing Princess, they called her. Some said she was lost forever, destroyed in the storm. Others whispered darker rumors that enemies of the throne had captured her. Fear spread through the stars, for without an heir, the future of Zytheria was uncertain. Meanwhile, in a far and forgotten corner of the galaxy, a tiny ship, broken and scarred, fell like a stone. It crashed into the ruins of an abandoned mining colony on a lonely asteroid. The ship's light went out, but inside Princess Leora still breathed. Weak and injured, she dragged herself out, clutching a golden pendant that carried her royal crest. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at the strange, empty world around her. The stars above seemed colder now. She was lost, alone, and far from home. "Mother?" she whispered again, her voice fading. Then she collapsed among the shadows of the ruins. Back in the palace, the queen did not sleep. She sat on her throne in silence, her eyes burning with unshed tears. She replayed her daughter's laughter in her mind. She remembered how Leora once said, "I'll always come back, mother." The queen closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "Then come back to me, child. Come back." But the palace was quiet. The stars gave no answer. The storm outside slowly calmed, leaving behind an emptiness that felt like a wound. The galaxy mourned, and the queen's heart turned colder each passing day. What no one knew, not even the queen, was that far away. Fate had placed the princess in the path of someone unexpected. A stranger from a race the queen often ignored. A human, and with that meeting, the story of the Vanishing Princess was only beginning. A human's unexpected discovery. The asteroid where Princess Leora's ship had crashed was quiet, almost forgotten by the galaxy. Long ago, miners from different worlds came here to dig for crystals, but when the resources dried up, they left. What remained was only broken machines, empty tunnels, and silence. But sometimes silence hides secrets. On this lonely world lived a human named Daniel. He was not a soldier, not a hero, not a king. He was just a worker, one of the few who stayed behind to salvage scraps from the ruins. Day after day, he collected metal, wires, and fuel cells to trade for food. He had no family here, no friends. only his tools and his small shelter. Daniel had heard the stories of the alien queen and her lost daughter. Every tavern in the nearby colony spoke about it. Some believed the princess was dead, others claimed she had been kidnapped, but Daniel didn't care much. Stories of royalty meant little to a man who worked only to survive. One evening, while searching through the tunnels for salvage, Daniel heard something unusual. A faint sound. At first he thought it was just the wind whistling through the cracks of the old mine. But then he paused. It was not the wind. It was softer, fragile. A voice. It sounded like crying. Daniel froze. No one lived here except him. No one should be crying in the ruins. Slowly he picked up his light and followed the sound. Step by step deeper into the broken mine he walked. His boots crunched against the dust and his heart pounded. The cries grew clearer. They were weak, trembling, almost fading away. He turned a corner and saw something that made him stop in shock. There, lying against a piece of broken machinery, was a young alien girl. Her silver hair glowed faintly under the light, tangled and dirty. Her skin shimmered with faint patterns that looked almost like stars. Her clothes were torn and her body was weak. She clutched something in her hand, a golden pendant shaped like a crest. Daniel's breath caught. He had never seen anyone like her before. She looked fragile, lost, and yet there was something about her presence that felt powerful. The girl opened her eyes slowly. They were bright, violet in color, filled with both fear and hope. She looked at Daniel and whispered, her voice almost too soft to hear. "Help me." Daniel hesitated. He had nothing. No medicine, no training, no reason to get involved. Helping her could mean danger. What if she was part of some royal war? What if others were searching for her? He thought of turning back. But something in her eyes stopped him. She looked at him not as a stranger, but as her last chance. Without another thought, Daniel lifted her carefully into his arms. She was light, too light, as if she had not eaten in days. She trembled against him. He carried her out of the ruins and back to his small shelter. Inside, he laid her on his simple bed. He gave her water, then searched his supplies for food. She tried to eat, but her body was weak. Slowly, she managed a few bites. For hours, Daniel stayed beside her, making sure she did not fall unconscious again. He did not ask questions. He only whispered, "Rest. You're safe now." When she finally opened her eyes again, she looked at him with gratitude. Her lips trembled as she spoke. "You are human." Daniel nodded. "Yes, and you? Who are you?" The girl hesitated. She wanted to tell him the truth, but fear held her back. What if he betrayed her? What if he sold her to enemies? Instead, she whispered, I'm lost." Daniel looked at her closely. Her pendant caught the dim light, and for a moment he thought he recognized it. He had seen that symbol before, on the news channels that spoke of the alien queen and her daughter. His eyes widened. Could this weak, broken girl be the princess everyone thought was dead? But he said nothing. He simply covered her with a blanket and replied, "Then until you are found, I'll help you." The girl's eyes softened. For the first time since the storm, she felt safe. She whispered a word in her own language, one Daniel could not understand, but he could feel the meaning. It was protector. That night, as the stars shone outside the shelter, Daniel sat awake. Questions filled his mind. Who was she really? Why was she here? And what would happen if others found out? Far away in the grand palace of Zytheria, the queen sat in her dark chamber. She did not know her daughter was alive. She did not know that fate had placed the princess in the care of a human, a species she rarely noticed. But destiny had begun to weave its threads. The human and the princess were now bound together by chance. And soon the galaxy would learn that sometimes the smallest choices change the fate of empires. The secret bond. The next morning, Daniel woke to the soft sound of breathing. The alien girl was still asleep, her silver hair spread across the blanket like a shining thread. For the first time in years, his shelter did not feel empty. There was life inside it. He sat quietly watching her rest and wondered again who she truly was. He could not ignore the golden pendant she wore. It was no ordinary trinket. Daniel had seen that royal crest in holograms and on broadcast news. It belonged to the House of Zytheria, the ruling family of one of the greatest alien empires. His chest tightened. If she was truly the missing princess, then keeping her here was dangerous. Yet when she opened her violet eyes and smiled weakly at him, All his fears melted for a moment. She did not look like a queen's daughter. She looked like a lost child who needed someone. "Did you sleep well?" Daniel asked gently. The girl nodded. Her voice was still weak, but she spoke softly. "Yes. Better than before." She hesitated before adding, "Thank you, human." Daniel chuckled. "My name is Daniel. If you stay here, you should call me by name." The girl lowered her gaze as if uncertain. "Daniel?" she whispered. The sound of his name on her lips surprised him. It was soft, almost musical. Over the next few days, Daniel cared for her as best as he could. He shared his food, which was simple but enough to keep her strength returning. He gave her water from his filters and wrapped her in spare clothes to protect her from the cold nights. Slowly she began to heal. She did not reveal her identity, but Daniel noticed her eyes often filled with sorrow when she looked at the stars. Sometimes she whispered words in her own language, words Daniel did not understand, but he could hear the pain in them. One evening, as they sat near a small fire, Daniel finally asked, "What happened to you? How did you end up in those ruins?" The girl looked into the fire, her face half hidden by the flickering light. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she answered in a quiet voice, "The storm took me. My ship, it broke. I thought I would never see light again." Her hands tightened around the pendant as if holding on to her only connection to home. Daniel wanted to press her for more, but he held back. He could see the fear in her eyes, and he knew that trust had to be earned, not demanded. So instead he said, "You're safe now. As long as you're here, no one will hurt you." The girl looked at him then, really looked at him. Her violet eyes glistened. "Why? You don't know me. Why do you help me?" Daniel leaned back, staring at the dark ceiling of the shelter. "Because once long ago, someone helped me when I was lost. I never forgot it. Sometimes kindness is the only thing that keeps us alive." The girl was silent, but his words sank into her heart. She had been raised among guards, servants, and generals who followed her mother's orders, not out of kindness, but out of duty or fear. This human was different. He had no reason to protect her, yet he did. For the first time in her life, she felt something strange, a bond that was not built on power, but on care. Days turned into weeks. Slowly she grew stronger. She began to help Daniel with small tasks, sorting scraps, cleaning, even repairing broken tools with surprising skill. Her hands were delicate, but her mind was sharp. One day, Daniel asked her name again. This time she looked at him for a long time before replying. "Leora," he smiled. "Leora, that's a beautiful name." She blushed slightly, unused to such simple praise. She had always been called Princess or Your Highness. Hearing her true name spoken gently felt different, almost freeing. But danger was never far. Strange shadows had begun to move around the asteroid. Raiders, scavengers, and spies always searched for treasure. One night, while Daniel and Leora were resting, they heard the distant hum of ships. The girl froze, her face pale. "They're searching," she whispered. "Who?" Daniel asked. "Enemies. They want me." Her hand tightened on her pendant. In that moment, Daniel understood the truth. She was not just a lost traveler. She was someone important, someone hunted. And if those raiders found her, they would not let her live. Daniel looked at her with determination. "Then we'll make sure they don't find you." She stared at him, shocked by his certainty. "You would fight for me? Even if it costs you?" Daniel's eyes did not waver. "I already made a choice when I carried you from those ruins. Whatever comes next, we face it together." For the first time since the storm, Leora felt hope. She whispered in her own tongue again the word she had used before. "Protector." This time she spoke it clearly to him, her voice steady. Daniel didn't know the meaning, but he felt it in his heart. Their bond had been sealed, stronger than either of them realized. Far away, the alien queen stood on her balcony, staring into the stars. Her heart was heavy with grief, yet she refused to give up hope. Somewhere her daughter lived. Somewhere her child was waiting. And on that lonely asteroid, a human and a princess were building a bond that would shake the galaxy. The queen's despair. The palace of Zytheria stood tall, but inside its shining walls sorrow lived like a ghost. Weeks had passed since the storm had taken the princess. Courtiers still bowed, guards still marched, and music still played in the grand halls. But behind the golden throne, the queen carried a weight heavier than all her kingdoms combined. She had ruled empires. defeated enemies and silenced rebellions with a single command. To her people she was unshakable, untouchable. Yet alone in her chamber she was only a mother, and a mother without her child is broken. Every night she walked to the highest balcony where the stars burned bright. Her daughter's laughter haunted her there. She could still hear the young voice whispering, "Mother, I'll always come back." But the balcony was silent now. Only the cold wind answered. Her generals feared her. They had seen her fury when she first learned of her daughter's disappearance. She had ordered endless fleets to search the storm. Dozens of brave pilots were lost trying to follow the trail of the missing cruiser. Even now her admirals reported daily. But the reports were always the same, no sign, no clue. Only silence. One evening, General Tharos, the commander of the Royal Guard, stood before her. His head was bowed low, his armor gleaming, but his voice trembled. "Your Majesty, we have searched every orbit, every asteroid within range. The storm has left no trace. We fear—" He stopped, afraid to finish the sentence. The Queen's eyes narrowed. "You fear what, General?" Tharos swallowed hard. "We fear the princess is gone." The Queen rose from her throne like a storm rising from the sea. Her voice cracked like thunder. "Gone? My daughter is not gone. She is alive somewhere waiting for me." Her anger shook the hall. Courtiers trembled. Guards lowered their eyes. No one dared argue. But inside, the Queen's fury was only a shield, hiding her breaking heart. Later, when the hall was empty, she walked again to the balcony. The stars stretched endlessly before her, but none brought comfort. She touched her chest where her daughter once hugged her and whispered, "If you can hear me, Leora, come back." The palace, once filled with joy, had grown cold. Servants moved quietly, afraid of disturbing their grieving queen. Festivals were cancelled, music silenced. Across the galaxy, whispers spread. The Empire is wounded, the Queen is weak. Enemies beyond the borders began to stir, sensing blood in the water. But none of this mattered to her. Empires could fall, stars could burn out. She wanted only her child. One night she sat alone with the ancient seer of Cytheria. The old being's eyes were covered with a veil, but they saw more than sight could give. The Queen's voice shook as she asked, "Tell me, is my daughter alive?" The seer spoke slowly, each word like a drop of water falling into an endless well. "The princess breathes. She walks in shadow. She is not alone." The Queen's heart leapt. "Where? Tell me where." But the seer shook her head. "The threads of fate are hidden. All I see is this: a stranger, a protector, one not of our blood walks beside her. His path and hers are bound. If she returns, it will be because of him." The Queen's chest tightened. A stranger? Not of their blood, a human? She almost laughed at the thought. To her, humans were nothing more than wanderers, weak compared to her mighty fleets. How could one of them matter to her royal daughter? Yet the seer's words rang with truth. That night she could not sleep. She sat by the crystal fire, remembering Leora's eyes, her laughter, her stubborn courage. Tears, rare and burning, rolled down her cheeks. No one in the palace ever saw them. She cried only when she was certain she was alone. Across the galaxy, news continued to spread. The princess is lost, some said. Others whispered darker things. Perhaps she is dead. Perhaps she is betrayed. The people grew restless, their faith shaken. Without an heir, would the empire survive? But the Queen refused to give in to despair completely. Her grief was deep, her hope fragile, but a fire still lived in her. If her daughter was alive, she would move stars and destroy worlds to find her. She stood before her generals the next morning, her voice sharp as a blade. "Continue the search, expand it. Use spies, use mercenaries, use anyone who will take my coin. If it takes years, we will not stop. My daughter lives, and I will see her again." The hall echoed with her command. No one dared question it. Yet behind her eyes, shadows lingered. For all her strength, the Queen knew this truth. Every day that passed without Leora's return was a dagger to her heart. She looked once more at the stars through the great palace window. She could not see the asteroid where her daughter now rested. She could not see the human who guarded her. But she whispered anyway, her voice soft, trembling with both pain and hope. "Come back to me, child. Please come back." Far away on that forgotten world, Princess Leora stirred from her sleep. For a moment her heart quickened. She thought she heard her mother's voice in a dream. She clutched her pendant tightly, feeling the bond that distance could not break. The Queen's despair was real, but so was her daughter's survival. Fate was still writing the story. And soon despair would give way to revelation. The return journey. The asteroid had grown dangerous. At first, Daniel thought he and Leora could stay hidden there forever. The ruins were quiet. Food was scarce but enough, and no one cared about this forgotten place. But shadows had begun to move closer. Ships that did not belong to miners passed through the skies. Strange signals filled the air. Daniel knew what that meant. Someone was hunting. One night, while he worked on repairing an old generator, Leora ran to him, her face pale. "Daniel, I heard voices near the tunnels. They are not your people. They search for me." Daniel's heart sank. He had feared this moment. If they found her here, there would be no mercy. "Pack what you can," he said firmly. "We can't stay here." "But where will we go?" Leora's voice shook. He looked at her with determination. "Home, to your palace, to your mother. That's where you belong." Leora's eyes filled with tears. She had wanted to tell him from the start, but now she confessed in a whisper, "I am Princess Leora, daughter of the Queen." Daniel did not act surprised. Deep down he had known. Her pendant, her grace, her fear, it all made sense. He simply nodded. "I already guessed. And it doesn't change anything. I'll get you back." For a moment she stared at him in silence. No fear, no doubt, only trust. The next day, Daniel worked to repair a half-broken freighter buried in the ruins. It was old, rusty, and barely flew, but it was their only chance. Leora helped him, her slender fingers steady as she reconnected wires and sealed cracks. She had grown stronger in the weeks with him, her courage returning. At night, the sound of enemy scouts echoed across the valley. Flashlights swept the tunnels. Daniel held his rifle tight, his eyes sharp. "They're closing in. We need to leave." Finally, the freighter's engines roared to life, coughing black smoke into the air. It wasn't perfect, but it could fly. Leora looked at Daniel nervously. "Will it hold?" He gave her a crooked smile. "It doesn't need to hold forever. Just long enough to get you home." They boarded, and with a deep breath, Daniel launched the freighter into the starry sky. The asteroid shrank behind them, swallowed by darkness. For a brief moment, it felt like freedom. But freedom never came easily. 3 enemy ships appeared on their scanners, sleek and deadly. Raiders. Their voices crackled on the comms. "The princess lives." "Bring her back!" Leora gasped. "They know." Daniel pushed the freighter's engines to the limit. The ship shook, alarm screamed, but he refused to stop. "Hold on." Laser fire lit the darkness, streaks of red slicing past them. The freighter rattled under the hits, shields failing. Daniel's hands gripped the controls tight. "We can't outrun them, but maybe we can outsmart them." He dove the ship into a field of floating rocks, remnants of a shattered moon. The raiders followed, their sleek ships weaving through the debris. Daniel twisted the freighter left and right, dodging stones and fire. Each move felt like a heartbeat away from death. One raider clipped a rock and exploded in a flash of fire. Leora cried out, clutching her seat. Daniel kept his focus, sweat dripping down his brow. 1 down, 2 to go, but the freighter was struggling. Systems sparked, engines groaned. Daniel knew they couldn't keep this up forever. Then he spotted something on the radar, a drifting cargo hauler, abandoned but massive. An idea struck him. He guided the freighter toward it, diving under its bulk. "They'll expect us to keep running. Instead, we hide." He cut the engines and slid the freighter into the shadows of the giant ship. The raiders scanned the area, lasers firing wildly into the rocks. For a tense minute, silence filled the cockpit. Leora held her breath. Daniel kept his finger over the controls, ready. Finally, the raiders, thinking their prey destroyed, sped off into the stars. Only then did Daniel restart the engines. The freighter hummed weakly but still lived. Leora exhaled, trembling. "You saved us again." Daniel smiled faintly. "Not yet. We're still a long way from your palace." As the stars stretched ahead, Leora stared at him. Her heart felt heavy with gratitude. "When we reach my mother, she will reward you. You will not be forgotten." Daniel shook his head. "I don't need rewards. I just want to see you safe." Her throat tightened. In that moment, she realized something. He wasn't protecting her for power or gold. He was protecting her because he cared. That thought filled her chest with warmth she had never known. But neither of them noticed the silent transmission the raiders had already sent. Word of the princess's survival was spreading across the galaxy. More enemies would come. More dangers awaited. Back in the palace, the queen sat upon her throne, listening to reports of growing unrest. She closed her eyes, grief eating at her, but then deep within, her heart stirred. A mother's bond. She felt something she had not felt in weeks, a spark of hope, faint but alive. She whispered to the empty hall, "Leora." And far across the stars, her daughter whispered back in the freighter as if she could hear, "Mother, I'm coming home." The palace gates. The freighter limped through the void like a wounded bird. Its engines sputtered, lights flickered, and cracks lined the hull. Daniel kept his hands firm on the controls, coaxing every bit of life from the dying machine. Beside him, Leora watched the stars race past, her violet eyes fixed on a single point ahead, the place she had once called home. "Will it hold?" she asked softly. Daniel smirked, though exhaustion lined his face. "It will hold long enough to get you there. After that, I make no promises." For days, they crossed hostile space. Raiders appeared, but Daniel evaded them. Patrols blocked their path, but he hid among asteroids and drifting wrecks. Every risk carried them closer, and with every mile, Leora's heartbeat grew heavier. She longed to see her mother, yet fear gnawed at her. Would the Queen even believe how she had survived? Would she accept a human protector by her side? At last, the palace world came into view. Its twin suns bathed the towers in golden light, and the great gates of the capital glowed like a beacon in the dark. Leora pressed her hands to the glass. Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm home," she whispered. Daniel slowed the freighter, approaching carefully. But as soon as their signal was detected, alarms blared across the planet's defenses. Warships swarmed toward them, shields raised and weapons hot. A booming voice rang out through the comms. "Unknown vessel, identify yourself. You approach restricted space. Any false move and you will be destroyed." Daniel swallowed. He was used to being ignored by the galaxy, not targeted by fleets. "This is Daniel," he said, his voice awkward. "I have someone important with me." The guards ignored him. "Cut your engines. Prepare to be boarded." Before Daniel could answer, Leora pushed past him, her voice fierce. "Stand down. I am Princess Leora of Zytheria." "Open the gates." Silence followed. Then the comms exploded with shouts. "The princess lives. She lives." Confusion spread among the fleet. Some ships lowered their weapons, others hesitated, unsure if this was a trick. Then, as the gates began to open, Daniel saw the massive palace courtyard fill with guards and courtiers. The freighter descended shakily, landing in the center of the royal grounds. Dust rose and silence gripped the crowd. The hatch opened. Leora stepped forward, her silver hair gleaming despite the dirt and torn clothes. Gasps echoed through the courtyard. Some fell to their knees. "The princess, she has returned." But all eyes quickly turned to Daniel, who followed her down the ramp. A human, dressed in worn clothes, a rifle slung across his back. Guards instantly moved, weapons raised. "Stop," Leora cried. She stood before him, spreading her arms wide. "He is my protector. Harm him and you harm me." The guards froze, stunned. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A human protecting the princess? Impossible. The heavy doors of the palace opened and the queen emerged. Her robes shimmered, her crown glowed like fire, and her eyes were sharp as blades. But when she saw Leora, her mask of power broke. Tears filled her eyes as she rushed forward. "Leora!" Her voice cracked, filled with a mother's grief and relief. She gathered her daughter into her arms, trembling. "You are alive. You are truly alive." "Mother," Leora whispered, holding her tightly. "I told you I would come back." The crowd watched in silence as the two embraced. For a moment, nothing else mattered. But then the queen's gaze shifted. She saw Daniel standing a few steps away, uncertain, dirt-stained, weary. The queen's eyes hardened. "Who is this?" Before Daniel could speak, Leora turned, her voice clear. "Mother, he saved me. When the storm took me, when enemies hunted me, when I was lost, he stood by me. I live because of him." The courtyard erupted with gasps and murmurs. A human saving the princess? Impossible. Yet the truth was written in her voice. The queen's face was unreadable. She studied Daniel for a long, tense moment. Her generals whispered at her side, urging caution, warning of trickery. Guards shifted uneasily, still pointing weapons. Daniel stood tall, though his heart pounded. He had faced storms, raiders, and death. But this, the judgment of a queen, felt heavier than all of it. Finally, the queen spoke, her voice calm but sharp as a knife. "You claim to have saved my daughter." Why, Daniel met her eyes. He wanted to say something clever, something strong, but the truth came out plain. Because she needed me, and because it was the right thing to do. The Queen's gaze flickered just for a moment as if the words touched something buried deep, but she quickly hid it. She turned back to her daughter, pulling her close. "You are safe now. That is all that matters." The guards closed in, their weapons still aimed at Daniel. Leora gripped her mother's hand tightly. "Mother, please. Don't let them hurt him. He is not an enemy. He is family now." The Queen's heart twisted. Her daughter's words echoed louder than the whispers of her generals. Family. Could a human ever be such a thing? The palace gates stood open, the air thick with tension. The Queen had her daughter back. But with her came a stranger who did not belong, and yet without him, the princess would not be standing there at all. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the Queen's judgment. "Mother, I'm back." The palace courtyard was silent, yet the silence was heavier than thunder. Every guard, every noble, every servant had their eyes fixed on the same sight. The lost princess in her mother's arms, alive after so many weeks. Hope and disbelief burned together in their hearts, but the peace did not last. The Queen stood tall, her crown gleaming, her face stern once more. She turned her gaze toward Daniel, the human who had walked into her palace with her daughter. "Lower your weapons," she ordered. The guards hesitated. A murmur rippled through them, but her voice had the weight of law. Slowly the rifles lowered. Daniel exhaled, though his body remained tense. The Queen's eyes narrowed. "You human, step forward," Daniel obeyed. He stood before her throne, a simple man in worn clothes carrying the dust of broken worlds on his shoulders. He had no crown, no army, no power, and yet he had something the Queen could not ignore, her daughter's trust. Leora pulled away from her mother gently and stood at Daniel's side. She lifted her chin proudly, her voice steady. "Mother, this is the one who saved me. Without him I would not be alive today. Every danger I faced, he stood beside me." The Queen's lips pressed into a thin line. "And why did you trust him?" "A human stranger." Leora looked into her mother's eyes with quiet fire. "Because he did what none of our guards, none of our soldiers could do. He protected me not out of duty, not for reward, but because he cared. He is the reason I am standing here." The Queen studied her daughter. She saw not only the child she had lost, but also a young woman transformed by struggle. Then she turned her gaze back to Daniel. "You risked your life for her. Tell me, human, what do you want in return? Wealth, land, power?" Daniel shook his head. "I want nothing. I only wanted her safe." A stunned silence spread across the courtyard. Nobles exchanged shocked looks. Who would reject a Queen's reward? Yet Daniel's voice carried no hesitation. The Queen's sharp eyes softened just slightly. She had lived her life surrounded by lies, ambition, and greed. Yet here was a man who asked for nothing. That truth unsettled her. Before she could respond, a sudden blast echoed from above. The sky lit with fire as enemy raiders descended, their ships piercing through the palace defenses. Screams filled the courtyard. Guards scrambled, raising shields, weapons flaring. The Queen's general shouted, "Protect the Queen! Protect the princess!" But the raiders had come for one thing only, Leora. Daniel moved before anyone else. Grabbing his rifle, he pulled Leora behind him as explosions tore through the gates. "Stay close," he barked. The Queen's eyes widened. She saw it with her own eyes, the human, unflinching, standing between her daughter and death. The battle raged in the courtyard. Guards clashed with raiders, lasers flashing across marble floors. Daniel fought with every ounce of strength, his shots precise, his stance unyielding. Leora stayed by him, clutching her pendant, her courage glowing like a flame. At one point, a raider broke through the guard line, lunging straight for the princess. The Queen gasped, powerless from where she stood. But Daniel moved like lightning, tackling the raider to the ground, striking him down before he could touch her. When the smoke cleared, the raiders were defeated. Bodies littered the courtyard, but the princess stood unharmed. The Queen descended the steps slowly, her robes trailing behind her. She looked at Daniel with new eyes. No longer as a stranger, no longer as a threat, but as the one who had done what even her mightiest warriors could not. She turned to her daughter. "Leora, my child, you truly are back?" Leora threw her arms around her mother once more, tears spilling down her face. "Mother, I told you I would return. He brought me home." She pointed to Daniel. "Without him, I would have been lost forever." The queen embraced her daughter tightly, her own tears falling freely now, seen by all. Then she lifted her gaze to Daniel. For the first time, her voice carried not command but respect. You have saved my daughter, human. You have given me back my heart. And for that, you will never be forgotten. The crowd erupted in cheers. The name of the princess was shouted across the courtyard, followed by whispers of the human protector who had changed their fate. Daniel stood quietly, his rifle hanging at his side. He was no hero to himself, only a man who had done what needed to be done. But as he looked at the queen and her daughter embracing, he allowed himself a small smile. For the first time in years, he felt he belonged somewhere, not because of a crown, not because of power, but because of the bond he had formed. The queen pulled back and looked at her daughter once more. You are home, my child. You are safe, and the galaxy will know that today. A mother's prayers were answered. The words carried across the courtyard, echoing through stone and star alike. And as Leora whispered, "Mother, I'm back," even the hardest hearts felt warmth. The queen's tears fell once more, not of despair, but of joy. And so a human's courage and a daughter's return rewrote the fate of an empire.